Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the special meeting of the Delray Beach City Commission this 25th day of July. The clerk, we have a roll call.
Mr. Markert?
Present.
Mr. Long?
Here.
Ms. Cassell?
Here.
Ms. Burns?
Here.
Mayor Carney?
Here, was that a tough call for you?
No comment whatsoever.
Anyway, this is a special meeting, and it's for the purpose of which we are going to be setting the proposed millage rate for the upcoming year, for the upcoming budget year. I understand that we, Mr. Moore, we have presentations to make first?
Yes,
correct?
sir. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon. And this is all in response to the various exercises and experiences we've had since the month of June, June 11th, July 9th, and July 16th, relative to millage rate considerations that took various forms, the crux of which is a function of the fact that the city of Delray Beach contemplated, or the city commission offered direction to enable the city of Delray Beach to offer considerations without impacting levels of service. That resulted in two considerations. The introductory one was a millage rate consideration of 6.2611, which is 1/10 lower than the current fiscal year millage of 6.3611, followed by additional opportunities to reduce further via the identification of efficiencies in operations to enable the city of Delray Beach to get to the best place possible. Likewise, yielding an opportunity to consider 6.0611, which was offered during the July 16th meeting. Of course, there was a sentiment expressed that additional background, clarity, metrics should be made available so as to enable the city of Delray Beach or the city commission to comfortably offer a millage rate direction, and therefore the direction to schedule this meeting and to set us on the right path in this regard. Likewise, we did have an opportunity, myself, various members of the executive leadership team, to visit with each of you to discuss various specific considerations in preparation for this meeting. The opportunity to metrically address considerations was a function of true practices of public budgeting and evaluation, including various forms of operational analysis, fiscal impact analysis, and revenue source and or funding analysis to help the city of Delray Beach move forward with respect to different level of service scenarios, to also take under consideration the rollback rate, which was actually readjusted slightly this past Tuesday evening. That is now set at 5.9063, and that clarity was offered to each of you individually so that we can prepare adequately accordingly. That change is a result of a calculation that was achieved working closely with the Department of Finance and the Palm Beach County Office of the Property Appraiser. Likewise, this needs to be a team-oriented engagement. Several departments are heavily dependent on general fund proceeds in which to operate, namely being police, fire rescue, public works, and parks and recreation. Each of those individuals will likewise offer brief presentation of scenarios in terms of why we are where we are to enable you to make a solid decision. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to offer a few slides for everybody's review and consideration and preparation for the departmental director's presentation, as I've just summarized and outlined. So if we could please make arrangements for that update, that would be great. If I could ask IT to upload the presentation, please. That was uploaded during the 11 o'clock hour. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you.
See it on these too?
I'm not sure why not on, but
Can we get the screens turned on so we can see them?
Go down to squint.
We don't have to turn our head.
right.
Do we turn it on
Could I
ourselves?
ask you a question, if you don't mind? And I apologize, my budget book, because is not sitting in front of me. But could we go through the revenue dollar amount, taxable revenue at 6.2611, at 6.0611, and at 59063?
Yes, ma'am. As we get prepared, I would like to ask Mr. Dunkley to please come forward with those numbers. They are approximately 187 million, 188 million, and 190 million, respectively.
That's about right.
87, 88, and 89?
Yep, and put a 1 in front of those.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you.
I got it. So, briefly, a little bit about Delray Beach, because part of our metrics and analysis involved a story of our growth over the past 10 years. There's been bar graphs and other data and analytics provided to the City Commission relative to why we are where we are, and it was based on a 10-year trajectory, including a history of millage rate adjustments and other considerations that needed to be executed. Over the past 10 years, the City of Delray Beach's population has actually increased by 7%, from approximately 63,000 to nearly 68,000 in terms of official estimates. That 2024 figure is actually slightly low, we think, because of course there are some considerations that the metric should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 70,000. The point in this regard is that Delray Beach is a growth-oriented community, as is the case with many other municipalities throughout the state of Florida. Next slide, please. Interestingly enough, during the same time period, cost of living has increased rather significantly, between 35 and 50% during the 10-year period as noted. Construction costs have likewise risen 40%, and much of the budget, like in every other municipality, does involve discretionary spending and contractual obligations, and with the focus relative to pension contributions having risen since 2015. Fire, 144% from 4.1 million to 10 million. Police at 80% from 4.9 million to 8.8 million. And general from 2.1 million roughly to $3.1 million. And these are rather obligatory and structured. And I hearken us back to the June 11th workshop meeting in which we had the actuarial experts externally offer an update in terms of the good work being done to sustain those sources across the board. Next slide, please. Other challenges that have been observed in terms of this presentation. 10 years ago, a one-bedroom apartment in Delray Beach was rented for about $1,200 a month. This represents an 83% increase over the last decade at $2,200 a month. Average cost of lumber, given that we are a growth-oriented community and regarded as desirable, average cost of lumber, $3.36 per unit. And of course, that's now at about $5.36 per aggregate unit. An interesting footnote, dozen of eggs, $2 back in 2014. That price has actually tripled to about $6 a dozen since that time. And interestingly enough, everyday metrics that people can connect. Next slide, please. We also celebrate the fact that Delray Beach is a highly accomplished community, highly award-winning, recognized. We do what we can to celebrate this, and frankly, much of this is a function of the City Commission and staff of the City of Delray Beach, helping us work really well to achieve a solid vision to move forward as both a municipal organization and a community. We've talked a little bit about this throughout the years, and a lot was accomplished in this regard, and for that reason, we remain very grateful. Next slide, please. We also made a commitment to offer a comparison of millage rates. And in this particular slide presentation, we're discussing what a typical property tax bill would look like in the City of Delray Beach and other municipalities that are neighbors to us. We talk about Boynton Beach, which is aggregate of 20.2516 mils as an example, our community to the north, whereas Delray Beach at 18.8998. This is taken under consideration Palm Beach County, the school district of Palm Beach County, other sources, Florida Inland Navigation District, South Florida Water Management District, all those in which we pay property taxes. Palm Beach Gardens is actually close to where we are. West Palm Beach is the highest in terms of the metric outlined. Next slide, please. Apples to orange comparison. This was suggested by a couple of you all to emphasize the points relative to how Delray Beach is fairly unique with respect to our ability for ad valorem and non-ad valorem general funding revenue sources. Delray Beach, as highlighted in column fiscal year 2024 in terms of total millage, the same metric of 18.8998. However, Boca Raton, Boynton Beach, Jupiter, and West Palm Beach, they have some form of fire assessment fee, dedicated fire millage rate, and of course there's a total fire assessment calculation that actually supports the general fund. This does not exist, ladies and gentlemen, in the City of Delray Beach, Florida, and it's therefore important to make that definitively clear so that we can move forward and get to the absolute best place possible. Next slide, please. millage rate of 6.0611. We talked a little bit about this during the July 16th regular meeting, and we were able to get there from the initial recommendation of 6.2611, whereby we took a look at a contingency adjustment of about $700,000, as well as a recent confirmation of a $500,000 reimbursement coming to the city of Delray Beach from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The rollback rate, of course, will likewise take under consideration additional departmental adjustments and reductions. I'd like to underscore also the fact that we went from 6.3611 to 6.2611 and further to 6.0611 in terms of considerations, identifying a number of efficiencies and operations to get to that place. The interest and guidance is to provide the Commission with much information and education background as possible so that we can achieve a clean decision this afternoon. It's highly necessary in this regard, and there was actually a comment or two that we were somewhat behind in terms of the budget process. We're actually not. The time frame experienced beginning June 11th up until where we are now today, July 25th, is an opportunity and has been an opportunity for the City Commission to offer its thoughts, leadership, and guidance with respect to what the policy should be in terms of a millage before finalizing a budget adoption, which will not take place until September. So that did provide some space, if you will, to help us get to that place. However, I appreciate the City Commission's guidance and expectations of the Office of the City Manager and likewise the executive leadership team, because it was a bit of a challenge. And coming back with a millage rate consideration of 6.0611 represents a 3/10 reduction from the current fiscal year millage rate of 6.3611. A tremendous move in a conservative direction to do what we can to support taxpayers, yet at the same time maintaining levels of services that are to be executed in a very effective and efficient manner. Likewise, we are now in position to hear from different departments. If I can ask the next slide to be facilitated, please. Parks and Recreation, Mr. Sam Mitat, if you would please come forward.
For one moment, though, can we hold on? I expressed in my meetings with you that my feelings about these reductions. I'm not interested in these reductions. I think they will impact services to our residents, right? And we are not interested in them. We've all expressed that we do not want the level of service to change. So if you don't mind entertaining me, Mayor, for one moment. I was actually cooking dinner one night and talking to my husband about this budget, and he says, cuts are revenues. That's the only way you can get more money. Mr. Warner sent me an email, and he said, you have to find ways to find revenue. And I was having this discussion with our attorney yesterday, and we were discussing monetizing the beach parking for out-of-towners. And I just want to say, because I don't know that we want our residents, part of this discussion concerns me, and I don't want to be reducing to where you're all going to sit up here and discuss things that we don't want. But if we impose beach fees on people who come into our city that are not residents, $35 is what Boca charges. I took my daughter to the beach for 2 hours. I paid at the gate. We have 180 spaces on A1A between Casarina and the beach. We have 82 at Anchor Park, 29 at Orange Grove, and 140 at Sandaway. 431 spaces, $35, it's $15,085 a day. If you filled every space, and we would have to leave spaces for the residents, or they would have a permit, we would have to give our residents the discount that we currently give them. We don't want to overcharge our residents. We're looking to find creative ways to get revenues from not our residents. And that's my goal here. And I think, Mayor, that is what you've been trying to do. Your rollback is a way that we can give some reprieve to the residents, and I want to go there with you. So if we were to monetize these spaces, we could get an additional $5.5 million annually. Additionally, and this might not be super positive, but I had another thought, because that's the revenue side. And I was thinking, Mr. Dunkley, about a cut that you might not like, but I think we could get to where we need to go without any of these considerations that you want to put forth for the residents. Purchasing department has not really been functioning optimally. We've been piggybacking, and we've been using Sourcewell for our procurement. Right now, that department costs the residents about $3.4 million with 6 employees. If we continue to use Piggyback and Sourcewell, and we don't look to build up the procurement department right now because we're not going out for big RFPs, and when we do, we usually consult with somebody. We could save ourselves in that department some money. Temporarily, Mr. Dunkley, don't panic, because eventually I would like us to be procuring the way we were before. But I'm trying to figure out a solution for just this year so that we can do what the mayor wants to do, which is give our residents a little bit of a break. And you know, one thing that I think people should understand, we're not reducing costs, we're keeping them the same. And here we can add some revenue. Thank you for that.
I just was interjecting. When will, because this is a special meeting, the public comment is it after the presentations here, or at what point do we have the public comment before our discussion?
It's at your pleasure.
I'm sorry?
It would be at your pleasure. I mean, typically you would want to do it after staff's presentation.
That's what I'm saying.
And
Okay,
then you would
that's
have
fine.
the public
That's
comment,
fine.
and then you would have board discussion.
Please continue, Commissioner.
No, I was done. I don't want
Oh.
the staff to present. I sat with them, and I don't like any of their discounts. I don't want to cut things that are going to impact our residents. And I know there's other areas where this can probably happen. I'm sure everybody has ideas, and I think once we determine the rate, we can then maybe meet with Mr. Moore again and figure out,
Well,
you know.
I mean, I found this budget itself very hard to deal with because I'm used to, and I have here the 2013 budget we did, where the specificity went to cost of pest services in buildings. We have such broad categories here that it's very hard to ascertain what things are. But we've had a 7% increase in population, that's true. We've had an 85% increase in our budget against a cost of living increase of 35 to 50%. Everyone wonders why rent is going up. Well, because everything is passed through to them, including the 40% of tax increases we've had in the last 5 years. You compare Jupiter, which is 21.1 square miles, and Palm Beach Gardens, which is 55.33 square miles, to Delray, which is 15.89 square miles, which begs the question, of course they have larger police, of course they have larger fire, because they have dramatically larger areas to protect. And so, you know, when I started into this process, I looked at some very few things, because I couldn't, as I said, I don't think this budget is not what I was used to in the old days, and you know, but it is what it is. But when I see, for example, which I brought up at the meeting, we've had over 30 positions for the city of Delray. There are 60 have been advertised, but over 30 of them have been advertised for more than a year. The county would have already gotten rid of them, because we have budgeted some of these jobs for the last 2 years. So nobody's in this position, so they end up in surplus. That's $1 million a year there. $1 million for things that are in our budget now for positions that have been open for over a year. Those should have been cut. They would have cut them in every other municipality, but for some reason we don't feel like we should be cutting them here. And so when I say that there's money to be found here, I mean, I know that you talked about ammunition, but a month and a half ago, the police department was here looking for an extra $150,000 for ammunition, because when has the police department ever been denied an additional increase in funds to buy ammunition? Do you know
Mayor,
any time?
if we're going to start questioning staff, can we let them present first? Then we can have this conversation. Wouldn't that make more sense? Just throwing it out there.
Yes. Please continue.
Is everybody interested in the
I mean,
presentation?
personally-
Yes,
I'm not.
our department heads prepared presentations. They're the
We
ones
all
who
saw them
do this full
yesterday.
time.
I'm not
The
interested
public
in any of
hasn't
their
seen
present-
it.
Why are you yelling?
I'm not yelling. The public hasn't seen it, and it's the only way to talk over you sometimes. So I would like to hear the presentations from our department
I'm
heads. I
not
think they
voting
should
for
be
their
publicly
cuts.
heard.
What do you want to hear?
Yes, I think that the.
Well, you've already heard the presentation.
I heard the presentation.
And, you know,
but we asked them to prepare something, and I think that the residents should see what they prepared.
Okay, you're going to be the presentation, but with this in mind, and I've said this before, and I invite everybody who's got their little phones to look up what's called the Washington Monument Syndrome. And what it is when government comes to you with very favorite programs and they say, well, we're going to have to cut this. And the public rises and says, we can't have our medians cut like this, or we can't have this cut like this, or we can't, because they get very emotional pieces within the budget. Instead of digging down deep into the budget, which has increased 40% in the last 5 years, and finding where the real cuts are. But by all means, continue.
Why are you undermining our staff before they've
I'm
even
not undermining
presented?
staff.
You're already impugning the
Because let me tell
credibility
you
of what they're about to say by making this metaphor about the Washington Monument. Let's let them
It's
speak.
not a metaphor.
The Washington Monument thing, it's an analogy.
Well,
Okay, so you're telling residents now whatever they're going to say is
I'm just
supposed to
saying-
make the budget look bad. Like let's hear them out.
why are we
give
talking
them the
about-
benefit of the doubt that our staff is going to give us a good faith analysis of the impact to their budgets, and then we can have a conversation about all of our individual perspectives about it. But it's not fair to, before they even start, tell the public you should take what they're going to say with a grain of salt. I don't think we should treat our staff that way. Personally.
continue.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Sam Meatot, Director of Parks and Recreation. This first slide, again, I apologize. I know many of you saw this yesterday, but we'll just go through it as quick as possible. What we tried to do here is outline the different segments within each budget of the four big departments to kind of show what it is those monies are allocated to. First and foremost is personnel services. That is our staff, right? That includes their salaries, their insurances, things like that. And as you can imagine, that's not a place where we can go in right now and make large-scale adjustments without affecting positions and people. So we're trying to show that there's a large percentage that's dedicated to that and therefore fixed. Capital outlay, as you can see, that's a reduced number, down. Although it wasn't big before, it's down to down $20,000 to 36%. And then we come to our operating expenditures, which is where you have some of your variable expenses. But again, I just want to remind everyone that within that number is also contracts, right? Like we know the big one is the tennis contract, but all your other variable or various contracts that are fit inside of that operating expenditures. So you get a very much smaller number that is variable, that we have some flexibility in, where we can look to make some reductions to try to fit this full rollback number. Next slide, please. So with the full rollback number, to go down from the 6.06 down to the full 5.9, what we're looking at is what areas can we look at to reduce that number without doing what the mayor said, which is affect any one big thing so much that it becomes the Washington Monument, right? We did try to take that into consideration. And what we looked at is instead of cutting one big event that might get people upset, is just reducing all of the events a little bit, right? Across the board, you pull them all back a little bit, and we can save upwards of $175,000 by doing that. The caveat on that is we know what happens if the fireworks aren't as grand or if the event isn't as special as someone's memory of the last year's or years gone past. Reduction in special events overtime kind of goes hand in hand with that. As we pull back on the event, we can save some money in the overtime that our staff works those events. One of the important things to remember is many of our events happen on holidays, which also leads to that overtime. And just because the 4th of July happens on a Thursday doesn't reduce our city's obligation for maintenance and product and services throughout the rest of the week. We can eliminate one of the part-time general maintenance worker positions. We haven't filled that yet, but that is a position we were looking to add to help with some concerns about the cleanliness and operation of Old School Square, nights and weekends, to get someone there. But we have not filled that. That is a place that we could look to pull back. Reduction in instructor funding. Again, not one thing, but across the board in our rec centers, pull back a little bit on our programming, a couple less classes, we could save a little bit there. And then, of course, a reduction in equipment purchase and repair. That's an across-the-board thing within our park maintenance, just pull back a little bit on our reductions in equipment there. Key factors to consider within the Parks and Recreation budget. When we discuss the Parks and Recreation budget, I think it's important to know that the budget has grown pretty significantly over the last 5 years specifically. And that is not us trying to just keep padding the budget annually. That is some major changes that have happened to us operationally, and that is the absorption of some of the city's major events. Number one being the 4th of July, the Christmas tree lighting ceremony listed here, but also remember that is a 30-day village that we operate from the end of November through the beginning of the new year. Of course, the St. Patrick's Day Parade, which was independent prior, and we now operate that with partnership with the fire department, and a New Year's Eve celebration. So those four big events really have impacted, especially on that special events line item, an increase in our budget. And then last but not least, with the increase in water rates, our irrigation bill to our own utility department has gone up significantly. you can imagine when we talk about 56 park properties and irrigating throughout the year, that number times the increase has changed quite a bit. It's not a number of parks and recreation sets every year. That is a number that we're given from finance to the utility billing department, and that increase has been pretty significant to our budget. So just wanted to highlight those things that those aren't things we can necessarily pull back on some of them, and that's what makes that challenging, and therefore the recommended cuts if we were to go to that full rollback.
Thank you. The next presentation would involve leadership of the Department of Public Works. Ms. Barletto, if you would, please.
Good afternoon, Missy Barletto, Director of Public Works. I did want to mention that each of the first slides here that look the same for each of the departments, this is reflective of the 6.0 611 millage rate. And just to dive a little bit deeper into what Sam told you about what composes our operating budget, for the Department of Public Works, this is just our operating budget. It does not include any of the capital improvement program budget. So our personnel services make up about 5% of the overall. The increase of change from last year to this year is about 5%. We reduced our operating expenditures by about that same amount. And we removed some of the capital outlay so that we brought our initial budget in at about 2% under what we had spent the year before. Of the operating expenditures at $7.337 million, about $4 million of that represents contractual obligations that we don't have the ability to change for the coming year. So that is a static number. That leaves us about $3.3 million to look at for all of the other kinds of things like our housing costs, our electricity, water and sewer bills, all of those, keeping our fleet on the road, just the ones in our department, that kind of thing. Once you take into consideration all of those cost of housing the department, considerations, that leaves us about $1.3 million in which we can actually make changes to reduce the amount. So if I could have the next slide. So in order to get down to the 5.9 rollback rate, we were asked to find an additional $210,000 in reduced expenses. We achieved that by removing a part-time position, by looking at reducing streets maintenance costs at $21,000. That is things like roadway supplies, purchasing less asphalt, less asphalt, less concrete, less tack for roadway repairs, and for miscellaneous services such as survey of easements and such things. We also reduced special events overtime by $10,000 across a couple of different divisions within the department. The $40,000 here in traffic operations and street lighting, that does actually represent removing some of the street lighting categories in their entirety. We have actually forged excellent relationships with Florida Power and Light. They have been covering these expenses, and we feel like we can make it a year without having that in the budget. So we think that we'll be fine if we reduce that by $40,000. Then the biggest reduction will come out of our building maintenance budget, which would just a number of different line items. We don't zero out any line item, but we reduce each of these line items by $5,000 or $10,000 each to get to this $100,000 reduction for things like buying new appliances, flooring replacements, new furniture, door locks, electrical supplies, window washing, that sort of thing.
The next presentation involves the leadership of fire rescue.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Kevin Green, Interim Fire Chief. So again, this slide represents the the current proposal that the city manager has, and the personnel costs in the upper left-hand corner there, the 37 million is actually not an accurate number due to the fact that $1.9 million budget transfer that was proposed was stalled off until the August meeting. So that number should be increased by 1.9 million, which would alter the change of 14%. It would lower that. So which would also lower your 10% on the bottom right-hand corner. So our operating expenditures, again, we went through and reduced, but there's only about 5% of our budget that we can actually control. In many cases due to contract obligations that we have for equipment maintenance and things of that nature. The capital outlay, we actually zeroed out all of our capital requests that we had previously made at the initial budget request. So those would be put off for another year if we could. So that's our current view. So to get to the rollback, we were requested to find another $819,000. And so we took a look at again at some of our operating costs, the non-personnel GLs, and identified another $150,000. And again, we went through all the various lines. We didn't just pick one. But again, those, the biggest ones amounted to the travel and the training. And as you can imagine, training is a critical component of what we do in order to stay proficient with our jobs. And but we would totally eliminate all of the travel that would be involved with that. And then further cuts to the replacement of maintenance and equipment. And much of what we do, as far as our operations and supplies, are consumable goods, right? Our EMS supplies and fire hose, everything that we have, our clothing, our the bunker gear that we wear, all those things are consumables. So those are things that we have a difficult time actually trying to cut back on and eliminate. To get to the bulk of the $819,000, we're proposing a $669,000 reduction in our overtime that would cover for the staffing of vehicles. So every day we have 33 seats that we need to fill. So the proposal would be to reduce the staffing on 2 of our rescue trucks. Currently we run, every fire station has a fire apparatus, and either an engine or a ladder, and a rescue truck. Each of those vehicles operates with 3 personnel, an officer and 2 firefighters, or in the case of a fire apparatus, an officer, a driver, and a firefighter. So we would propose to reduce the staffing on 2 of our rescue trucks by not filling vacancies, overtime vacancies, as they occurred. Today, for an example, we're fully staffed, nobody's on overtime. But there are days, yesterday I had 4 people on overtime, because it varies depending on sick, injured, things of that nature. But we have an obligation to fill those seats. So this proposal would allow us to not fill vacancies on 2 of the rescue trucks as those needs arose, depending on the day. The consequence of the 2-person rescue, I know there's been a lot of discussion about that and the potential cost savings, and that's what we did years ago, and there was no real impact to that. Just to speak briefly on the 3-person rescue, that is the industry standard here in South Florida. When I started at West Palm Beach in 1984, we had 3 people on the rescue at that time. Delray Beach was somewhat behind, and up until the last few years, we were running 2 people as well. So the 3rd person, what that does, every fire station, again, has a fire apparatus and a rescue truck. So the majority of the protocols for the majority of our medical calls, which are 75 to 80% of our call volume, require 3 people to respond to that call, depending on the nature of the call. If it's a minor trauma injury, then yes, 2 people can handle that. But the majority of the calls require 3 people to respond. With a 2-person rescue, that means that the fire engine also has to respond with the rescue truck to get the 3rd person there. if that rescue has to transport, then they're going to remove the firefighter from the fire engine. They're going to get on the rescue truck to transport to the hospital. Now that engine is out of service for another length of time. But the immediate cause and effect is that with both the engine and the rescue out of service due to being on a call in that zone, when the second call for service comes in for that zone, there is no unit there to respond. So we have to go to another station that's further away. That is a delayed response. And in many cases, it's going to be at least 3 to 4 minutes, if not longer, depending on the location of the call and the location of the station that's responding. And we'll use the worst case scenario of a cardiac arrest. We know that brain death happens within 6 minutes. So if there's a delayed response, the survivability rate of a cardiac arrest, a person in cardiac arrest, goes to 0. It's just as simple as that. And so the need for having three, that's the purpose for having 3 people, is the rescue can respond to the vast majority of the medical calls on their own, leaving the fire engine in the fire station to respond to that second call for service. The other trickle down on the 2-person rescue is that we enjoy an excellent relationship with Palm Beach County Fire Rescue for automatic aid. We receive more calls from, or responses from Palm Beach County Fire Rescue than we give to them. So along the western edge of the city, Military Trail basically, they have fire stations on the west side. Obviously ours are on the east. And when a call occurs, we do respond back and forth to each other's areas. And that's in order to get the closest unit to the call as possible. So the scenario that I gave yesterday was there's a fire at the Commissioner Casal's house. She's in Sable Lakes. More than likely, there would be 3 or more Palm Beach County units that would respond to that to her house. So that does 2 things. One, it gets the closest units there to take care of the problem, which I'm sure she's very happy about. The second thing it does is it leaves the Delray Beach units in their stations rather than pulling the fire station, the units from the beach, Station 112, or from Linton Boulevard to respond to her neighborhood for that call. Those units remain in zone to run calls here in the city, which continue to come in. So by reducing our staffing to 2 people on a rescue, again, that goes against the standard here in Palm Beach County. At some point, Palm Beach County is going to continue to run more calls, additional calls over and above what they currently run. At some point, they're going to say, wait a minute, this is not working for us anymore. And they potentially could pull back on that automatic aid agreement, which would be a bad thing for all of us altogether. And partially that would be because of the potential, they would be offsetting the potential budget cuts that you're proposing here. So we don't want to compromise that relationship that we have with them. So that's how we would get to the rollback rate of $819,000.
Thank you, Chief Green. Final departmental presentation, Chief of Police Russ Major.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. As you can see, and it's the same slide for all department heads. Our personnel services, that is driven by salaries and wages, and given the cost of living and inflation and the salaries, it's only 3%. I hate to say it's only 3%, but when you factor in the driving rates with regard to salaries and wages and insurance, 3% isn't terrible. Operating expenses and capital outlay. Operating expenses we were able to reduce by 3%. The capital outlay, what's driving that is vehicle and police technology. Unfortunately, we can't control that. It's just the cost of doing business, so to speak, and we don't have any say-so in that. Overall, just to really get down to the nuts and bolts of what that all means when you start seeing numbers, is we are operating on a $49 million budget for this year. We're only going to a $50 million budget. When you look at that, and I hate to use that the loose language of saying only, it's a lot of money, but it's a 2% increase. It represents $948,000 increase between this year's operating and next year. Mr. Moore has created an extremely lean increase with regard to the budget. in police. So right now, currently, we're sitting at a $50 million budget with only a 2% increase. Next slide. When we look at the potential for a rollback, the number that I failed to mention is the contractual obligations, as each department head had mentioned. Those are the numbers that we cannot touch. Right now, I have $2.1 million in non-discretionary contractual obligations that I can't touch. At the end of the day, that leaves me with $1.8 million to function and operate for the whole entire year. When you factor in what this means with the rollback, it's very small, and I apologize, but there's a lot of stuff on there. With regard to community programs, if we were going to try to facilitate, my cutback in this scenario is $836,000, almost $1 million. It would impact Atlantic High School, some of the community programs, Atlantic High School Criminal Justice Academy, the Explorer program, and I'm not going to read them all, but I'm just going to highlight some of the items. It would impact freezing some positions within the civilian positions within the agency, 2 communications dispatch positions, primarily our SWAT with regard to equipment. It would reduce the training with regard to SWAT. It would reduce ammunition. Wouldn't eliminate, but it would create a reduction in the purchasing of ammunition. It would reduce our cameras within our police department on the outside, which they are long overdue, and we've been kicking that can down the road with replacement of cameras to keep our building safe. Reduction in purchasing with regard to equipment that we need to operate annually. Just to name a few: headsets, vehicle printers, helmets, tools, laptops, etc. Some of the operating expenses would be hit, which would include the office supplies, to include jump boxes, flash drives, batteries, cables, handgun supplies, reduction in the Axon, which is our body camera, and vehicle camera obligations that we have. We have to retain that information somehow, some way, and it's a digital storage program, if you will. That by itself is $109,000, and that's just technology. That's just where we are today. And when I think about how lean we are going into this, operating right now at a $49 million budget, projected next budget to be at $50 million with only a $948,000 increase. The idea of going back another $836,000 would be detrimental to the police department. It makes it very difficult to operate in the way we want to operate and provide services to the community. Calls for service, it doesn't mean that we're not going to be there. I'm not going to say that we can't respond to a call for service, but the reduction is going to do something like present a situation, something like this. We have calls for service that we'll go to. You call and you want the police to respond. We're responding with this reduction. However, it's what happens after that. Am I able to create a crime prevention scenario? Am I able to put officers out on the beach when there's a shooting? Am I able to respond to a neighborhood when there's a shooting? What I'm getting at on a granular level is we have proactive policing measures that we employ at this city. We operate as a police department much higher than others. We have an expectation for the safety of everyone in this community. When we have crime, I want to be able to respond out. I don't want to be reactive. When you tie my hands, I don't have the money to put officers out there when they're needed. This is the scenario that's going to be created. I want to be proactive, as we have been all along. I want to be able to put officers where we need them. What does that mean in a nutshell with regard to cost? We just had a shooting on the beach not too long ago. I'm sure most of you have heard about that. We have provided a 7-day-a-week coverage in the evening to combat and be proactive with regard to follow-up investigations. 7 nights a week at 4.5 hours on each night is equating to approximately $32,000 in overtime. That's 1 month, 1 incident. I don't think that that's a poor implementation or an overuse of funding. It would happen in any particular community in our city. I feel that I have an obligation as a chief to put out a certain product as everybody in the residents of this community, and I want to keep you safe. I don't know that what I would call being penny wise and pound foolish. I want a savings for the residents in this community, but I'm not sure that that savings outweighs what could happen if you're forcing me to cut back on my services as a police department.
Thank you, Chief Major. Before turning it back to the City Commission, a couple additional points I'd like to highlight and underscore. The current millage rate of 6.3611 reduced to 6.2611 down to 6.0611. That's a 3/10 swing from that of the current fiscal year to that level. It's based on the current revenue structure. There was commentary offered relative to ancillary revenue considerations and the guidance and expectations the majority of you communicated regarding maintaining level of service standards. That's the basis in that regard. That's a tremendous opportunity. And the Office of the City Manager, the Department of Finance, and the impacted departments that are general fund dependent did an excellent job in terms of work, analysis, review, respective considerations to enable a solid education process and giving you the ability to make a decision. That's why we are here. And the other point I wish to make is, as I'm getting to know several of you all, more so than I have before, I met with you all on the periphery, I'm understanding you all's expectations as far as granularity. Mr. Carney, you talked a little bit about your experiences going back to 2012. Well, this is our first time working together. I've learned in this exercise that you have an interest in granularity. Thus the direction offered just yesterday to provide the commissioners with worksheets so that you all can have an opportunity to delve into that. But that's a function of the proposed budget process, which will be post this exercise, August and until September. So there's opportunities to engage in that regard. But to reiterate and to offer assurance, my interest is to work with you all, every one of you all, meet every expectation we possibly can. Recommendations are based on the current revenue structure. So that's a great thought. If there are some opportunities to consider enhancements to revenue considerations, that would necessitate a forecast of about $2 million based on the numbers having been communicated and what you've heard here today. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I genuinely feel that a great deal of information and guidance has been provided to enable a decision. Whatever decision is reached today, we will offer follow-up guidance and direction to make it whole. So thank you.
Great. You're all finished with your presentation, yes? Okay.
Yes, they are.
Then it would be time for invite the public. Any members of the public wishing to speak on this matter before the commission? If you could come up, state your name for the record and address, and you will each have 3 minutes to speak.
Montre Bennett, 323 Northwest 2nd Avenue. As far as parking goes, y'all need to mail that stuff to people's house anyway so they know it is available. Parking permits, send that to the resident's house via mail so they know it's available. All residents don't come here. Instead of making us apply for it, because we're already paying for bills, just send it to us. Yeah. In the fire rescue, just right here in the north and south side, for a 3-man crew, y'all move slow anyway. So it really don't matter. So it don't matter. Do what you're supposed to do just right here. The fire department right there. Why take 10 minutes to come to my house if I'm having a heart attack? I don't know. I don't know. And in the police department, y'all don't even solve cases. Like, how many people done got shot and killed around here? Y'all ain't solving no cases. So what
Are
is
people supposed to address department heads individually?
You're going to do, but please keep your comments to the commission.
Okay,
not
but
to any
to
particular
the
person in
police,
the audience.
that's y'all too. It's all the same.
You're welcome to say those
The
things to us.
cases ain't being solved. So if it's a decrease or increase, it really don't matter because you're not solving cases, and I'm complete.
Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, Stephanie Immelman. I'm the CEO of the Delray Beach Chamber of Commerce. And I just wanted to say that the Delray Beach Chamber applauds the continued efforts of the past 7 or 8 city commissions to continually lower the millage rate. This helps our residents as well as our businesses. And even with the millage rate cuts, the city staff has been able to provide a high level of service that our communities come to expect, and we appreciate, and we want it to continue. But I'd be remiss if I didn't remind everyone how tough it has been on businesses the past few years due to COVID, inflation, high interest rates, and high insurance rates. So we would advocate that the commission does everything in its power to lower the millage rate as much as you've done over the past few years. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Christina Morrison, 1000 Lowry Street in beautiful downtown Delray Beach. Back when Mayor Tom was a commissioner, there was a city board made up of all residents called the Financial Review Board. And we were tasked with looking at city services, city functions, and trying to find ways to make them more efficient. That was a very eye-opening experience. I was on that board for many years and chaired it for 2 years, and it was a very eye-opening experience. One of the things we discovered was that our tax base is overwhelmingly residential. 75 to 80% of our tax base is residential. When you look at cities in our area with lower millage, they have a much lower percentage of residential. They have a much higher percentage of industrial, office, other functions of the city that pay the taxes. In our city, we don't have that. 80% of the expenses are paid by our residents. That is unbelievable. And very expensive, by the way. We have, according to our own city's website, we have 42 parks, 20 tennis courts, 10 ball fields, 2 golf courses, and a tennis center that's very underutilized. And our city residents are paying for all that. We're not sharing the expenses with a wider tax base or with the general public that may be interested in helping us with some of those areas. Give you an example. We need to take some of the tax burden off of our residents and share it. Other cities do that by strategic partnerships. We've had many opportunities before some of you have been up there, but we've had many opportunities to share the expenses of our city with strategic partners. One of them is Meg Mallon. Tom, you know her. She's a professional golfer, lives right here in Palm Beach County. She came with the group that wanted to take over management and leasing of the golf course. For 10 years, they would renovate the golf course. They would pay that whole expense and run the golf course and take that onus of that expense off of the taxpayers for 10 years and renovate the golf course, which is, as you all know, is very barely needed. So maybe we should be looking at that. A few years ago, we had a music promoter come into town wanting to take over the Crest Theater and the amphitheater, pay to have them renovated, make it a first-class music venue, both of them. And we set that aside. Maybe it's time to dust that off and share that expense, because right now, the renovation of Old School Square is being paid all by taxpayer money. It used to be paid with a nonprofit that was sharing 75% and raising 75% of the funds privately, and the city was only responsible. Thank you
very much.
Good afternoon. Deborah Walker, 1312 Northwest 2nd Street, Delray. My first comment is that thank you all very much for giving us the overview. We needed to hear that, Julie. You heard it, but we needed to hear it also. Secondly, when we talk about these expenses, are we talking Delray residents that have their primary home here? Or are we talking Delray residents that have a home in the Northeast somewhere or someplace else in the country and their second home is here? If we're trying to reduce rates for people with a second home here, we should not even be concerned about them. I am trying to live in my one house only. We got a lot of folk that live here that this is their second home, and we don't need to be trying to reduce their rates. They need to be paying. I went to park downtown the other night, and I knew there was a parking permit, but I haven't gotten it yet, and I'll be getting mine October 1st. $26 to park for 2 hours. What's going on with that money? If people are paying that kind of money to park downtown, and I know there's got to be a lot of people paying it because they were surprised like me when they got there, what's happening with that money? Why isn't that money being used for our budget? And that's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Michael Weiner, a proud owner of the Clark House and the Masonic Temple, which are 100 years old today, or this year,
Congratulations.
and for which I've owned for them each for more than 25 years of their lifespan. I've paid a lot of taxes in Delray Beach, Florida. We're talking about, at most, reducing the millage rate by about 5%. And then that's only a reduction in the percentage. It's not necessarily a reduction in the dollar amount. It's important that those people doing business in Delray Beach and the citizens of Delray Beach know that you are doing this with a sharp pointed pencil. And it's important to us that we know for certainty that we don't allow it just to creep up for the purposes of making things easier or more simple. So maybe there's a lot of emotions at this particular meeting, but it's important. We like to hear this. It is great to hear this. But when you do it, we hope that you take a look at all of the problems and situations that you have with respect to the budget and with the revenue, and that you find creative solutions, and one of them is not just a creep in the millage rate. So let's continue to do this process. We'd like to see the millage rate controlled. It will help the small businessmen as well as the landowners. And please continue this process and find a way to keep it from just being creeping up. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public wishing to comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Yes, Mr. Moore. No, you were grabbing your mic. Are you saying something? I was going to say to the commission. Mr. Long.
All right. Thanks everyone who spoke, and thanks again for the presentations from staff. Mr. Moore, I guess, could you help straighten out the whole issue of whether, if we do adopt the rollback rate, what our staff just presented to us, that is the outcome, correct? There is no scenario where we can have our cake and eat it too, where we are not looking at these budget cuts to these departments.
Given the current revenue structure, that would be correct. However, in the event that we can consider some ancillary revenue offset to be able to support the continuation of level of service, that's where we would be.
May I just to clarify that question, excuse me, Commissioner Long. These are proposed cuts. There is nothing from this commission stopping this commission from finding its own cuts in the budget to impose when we finally adopt a budget. Is that not correct?
That is also appropriate, not for today's discussion.
I'm saying, but
for the if I may please, for what we can potentially address beginning in August and the budget adoption process, 2 hearings in the month of September.
Right. My point is, just because they talk about these particular cuts, those are not necessarily the cuts that are going to be made when we finally approve a budget. Is that not correct?
Of course, you do have that opportunity. However, based on analysis and the good work we've initiated in the previous weeks, those are some serious considerations and therefore the basis for presentation.
Well, as we get deeper into all the details of the budget, we can then, discuss all that. I'm sorry, continue.
So, just to continue on that conversation, we have now, at several meetings, kind of sent the city manager back to reevaluate our budget and look for those cuts and look for additional cuts. And I think, frankly, they must have found some, because the other proposal here, the 6.0611, is significantly lower than the original recommendation. And that's 0.3 of a mil lower than last year. That means it's 3 times what we lowered it by in the last 7 consecutive years. That's a victory in and of itself, I think, and a testament to how hard our staff has tried and how much they have dug into their own budgets to find efficiencies. So I hazard to say that are there other additional cuts that could be made that you guys, it seems like you have put an intense amount of resources into investigating that. And this is what we've come up with. I don't buy into the attitude that you guys are bringing up the worst possible cuts just to make it look alarmist and get the public support, that this is somehow political. I believe that we are at the point where there are no other cuts to be made, and these are the ones that are on the chopping block that we're looking at. I have to believe that. I've worked with this staff for over a year. I have no reason to think that they lack integrity or they're not good at their jobs or that they would want to make any of these cuts or just throw them out there to try and, you know, get us onto their agenda. I don't buy that. I buy that we have this staff has spent an incredible amount of time based on our direction, rightfully so, based on that investigation. And because of that, we actually have found a much lower millage based on that. But I don't see a scenario where this 5.903 rollback rate works. It's clearly compromising our level of service to our residents, which is something we've had a consensus up here that we're not willing to do. So, Mr. Moore, can you tell me what the difference between the, we'll call it the reduced rate, the 3.0611 rate, the difference between that and the rollback rate, what that looks like per year, per resident, I guess what the metric is per $300,000 of assessed value?
You're referring to the 6.0611 consideration vis-a-vis the 5.9063 consideration. The difference would be approximately $67 or so.
$67
or so
per year.
I just want to jump in here just to clarify, because I'm not going to let things pass without clarifying them. Am I not correct that you are using a $300,000 average home price based on people having homestead exemptions for a period of time, and they don't reflect necessarily the homesteads or purchases that were made in the last 5 to 10 years in Delray? You're using a set $300,000 home based on long-standing homestead exemptions, and not based on the true fair market value of the properties in Delray Beach.
It's primarily based on the.
Because I can't find a house I can't find a lot for $300,000.
No, sir, and that's a fair metric. So we can even take a look at a $400,000 consideration or a $500,000 consideration, and that can be offset by another $10 to $15 to better answer the question.
And I did qualify that was per $300,000 of assessed value. So it's 67. So we can do the math. If a house is worth $900,000, we take that times 3, and the savings is, you know, almost $100 per year per resident. I'd hazard to say that most residents, if you polled them and you said you could save $100 a year, which equates to how much a month, like $8 or $9 a month. If you could choose between the two, between saving $8 or $9 a month, or having, let's see, all of our events reduced by half, a reduction to our maintenance, which would be our parks and our medians, reduction to our street maintenance, reduction in our street lighting, reduction in our historic property maintenance, reduction in our fire training and equipment replacement, down to 2 personnel, which could severely impact our call response time. We could be looking at a loss to our mutual aid agreement with the county, community programs for police, equipment for police, reduction in crime prevention resources. So I would imagine if you asked most residents if they were interested in saving $8 or $9 a month, and that's assuming they have a house that's worth $900,000, or they want to have their public safety impacted, the integrity of our events impacted, our maintenance impacted, potentially our tourism economy impacted, I'm going to guess they'd be willing to pay that extra $8 or $9 a month. So again, Mayor, I give you credit for getting us to this point. It's an honorable pursuit to try and save our residents and our businesses money. I understand that ad valorem has gone up and that ultimately they will be paying more taxes that year. But there's only so much we can do to counteract that and maintain level of service here. And I think this 3.0611 is a victory for this commission and a victory for our residents, that we can get it that low. That's 3 times what we have dropped it in the last 7 years at least, and still maintain our level of service for our residents. That in and of itself is an accomplishment, and one that you got us to, Mayor. So that's where I'm going to be on this.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Marker, are you ready?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Couple of things. We sat through presentations from the staff yesterday, and I want to say it publicly because I said it to them. Our staff in the city is amazing. This is a wickedly difficult process. Coming out of the corporate world, we went through this every year, similar process. And I just want to compliment the staff for their presentations yesterday, their thinking. I've got so much faith in you guys. It's unbelievable. Any one of these people could work inside a Fortune 5,000 company. I can tell you that right now. The second thing, my friend Christina Morrison, I heard what you said, and you're absolutely 100% right, and I wrote that one down. We should be exploring more partnerships. We absolutely should. We do have some things that are going on. We're talking to FPL on a project right now, but are we doing as much as you were indicating we should do? No, we're not, and that's a clean takeaway for me from this meeting. There does seem to be overwhelming support in the community from our residents and from our businesses about lowering the millage rate. That seems to be very clear feedback that I've been getting for months now. And I have faith in our staff. Will we get it perfect? No. No budget is ever perfect. It evolves in real time, and we will make adjustments if we cut too deep in some place mid-year and we have to make an adjustment. We're gonna make an adjustment. We're not gonna let the ball drop. I think that we can achieve reductions without sacrificing service. I really believe that. And I also said to staff yesterday, Delray Beach is a fantastic place, and we are doing really, really well right now. And I don't want to go backward in terms of what we're providing to the residents either. And I think the cuts that were outlined here, I think we'll be fine, and I think we can achieve the end goal of saving the taxpayers some money and keeping our levels of service as they are. Mayor, I applaud you for getting us to this point as well. It was a bit of an unpopular position, but I think it was the right thing to do.
As long as I'm not tarred and feathered at 10 out of 10. Would you like to go for Commissioner Burns?
Well, I want to start by saying that, you know, we all acknowledge the rising costs, and someone mentioned COVID and the hit that businesses and residents took. You know, my son lost the business, had to close the doors. So, you know, I've been there. My property taxes and insurance has gone up. However, we asked, and I thank staff for your presentation, because I wanted to see exactly what we were cutting. And you've made that very clear to me, what we're cutting. And I think that, you know, not speaking for my colleagues, but I think we're all in agreement that we do not want to cut level of service that we're receiving in our community. However, I heard some things that I would like to have pursued. I know we need to make a decision on this. And the rollback rates, we saw the figures would make a significant impact on our community and what we provide to our community. And we have been committed, this commission prior to me, last 10 years or so, committed to reducing the millage rate over a 10-year period of 0.1%, and we are currently on track with doing that. And with this rollback rate, I mean with the rate of the 6.066?
6.06.
Which is
6.0611.
Which is, as Commissioner Long said, is a 0.3 mill rate reduction. So that's 3 times. So I support continuing the gradual decrease in the millage to save taxpayers money, businesses, whatever. I just really, really am stuck with not affecting level of service and employees in our city. You know, we have a lot of wear and tear on the community. Our rates, we talked about, I think there was a increase of residents, 1,340 new residential units in the last 5 years. However, it seems to me that this rollback rate we would not have the benefit of revenue that we would get from those. We have over 50,000 visitors to our city each day. That could be up or down. We have to take into consideration the wear and tear that has on our community. I like what Commissioner Cosell said about the parking. I know that when we raised the parking rates last year, everybody was all up in arms, and it wasn't near $35. So right. I don't know, but I liked what I heard about creative solutions. I think that, you know, if we can come up with some creative solutions that does not take us to the presentation, that last part of that presentation, I would be in support, and I appreciate your efforts, Mayor. However, let's keep our level of service. Thank you.
Are you?
Yeah. I'm done.
Commissioner Casal.
Thank you. And yes, to reiterate what I said previously, the $35 fee for beach parking would be imposed on non-residents and could potentially garner a $5.5 million increase in our revenues.
You're not talking about parking, you're talking about a use fee, right?
I'm talking about a parking fee that applies like a use fee.
Right, okay. Just checking.
However we
Just
word
clarifying.
it, it's a fee
I'm
that
in
would
my
be
interrupting mode
imposed on non-residents and who the beach is our economic driver. People visit it daily. We just got the Blue Flag program. It's a good idea to try to monetize it and to find creative ways to get revenue in the city, because the only way we are going to not impose these costs on our residents is if we find another way to get the money. You know, Mayor, I want to support you in this, and we all sat yesterday. I'm not interested in diminishing services. Although, Sam, I did say I think you could reduce the Christmas Village just to give your staff a little bit of a break during the holiday time. My daughter and I always volunteer at the tree. Your staff works tirelessly at the busiest time of year. They're away from their families when everybody else is coming with their families. I think you should reduce that just for that reason. And we did talk about another special event. Maybe, Chief, you could go without the chairs, but everything else I would not reduce. Chief Green, I gave you such a hard time in a polite way about the fact that your department really does. The increase in cost to the city since 2018, your contract increase costs the residents about 140%. It's a 140% increase. For me, knowing that we were coming out of COVID and we weren't going to have the ARPA funds and how people were struggling in the city financially with inflation, I think that last contract was a travesty. The city of Delray Beach, because of that last contract, is forced to hire 22 new employees. I want to take care of our current employees. I want to make sure that they have the benefits that they deserve in the future when they retire. But the idea of going out and hiring 22 new employees who are, and I look at the fire department in a different way. We are committing to a lifetime of pension for these individuals because of their service to us. It's a very big commitment and it's very costly, and I think we need to figure out a way. I've appreciated you stepping up, and I was remarkably impressed by you yesterday, I have to say, because we haven't really communicated that much in the past. We need to work together to figure out a solution that serves your gentlemen so they feel like they are appreciated, but also serves our residents, because this contract does not serve our residents, this current contract at all. And I would say that to you respectfully, and I thank you for taking that. I want to talk about how we got here a little, because maybe taxpayers don't understand. We have missed revenues in this city. When I sat up here and developments came in front of us, I was arguing, why aren't we getting impact fees? Once I reached out to a city member and they said the commission didn't have a taste for it at the time. We missed a lot of money that could have been given to the taxpayers in impact fees. Police impact fees, fire impact fees, we got Little Park impact fees. We're not getting what the residents need to serve them in the way that we want to serve them. Additionally, and I appreciate Ms. Morrison coming up here and talking about that, but it harkens back to the Aura development, which I fought tirelessly against, because we cannot reduce the commercial property land use in our city at all. We should not be. Our comp plan suggests that creates an unfair burden on our taxpayers, on our residential taxpayers, and we are seeing it now because we have been doing that. We are converting commercial property into residential, and it's creating a problem for our residences. So I thank you for pointing that out. So now that we know how we got here, how do we move forward? And I share everybody's view up here. I do not want to reduce to the point where our residents are impacted. Period. I don't. So what I'm suggesting, again, because I said it in the beginning, is that if your 5.9063 millage is a reduction in $4.8 million, and that's what your slide said up here, Mr. Moore. If we monetize our beach, we could be looking at 5.5 million. And if Mr. Dunkley, forgive me, we try to do something in your department, we're looking at that money right there. As I suggested, because purchasing is not going out and procuring as they were, they're piggybacking and they're using Sourcewell. You are down, I believe, manager, correct? Because I believe there was an advertisement recently for somebody in that department. You don't
Correct.
have to get up. Thank you. We can reduce down a little in that department, continue to use the Sourcewell and piggyback, and work into next year. Build it back up, and in the meantime, find creative ways to get revenue for our residents. I will support you, Mayor, if we think we can do that. I'm not interested in reducing down services, but I am interested in increasing revenues outside of what we currently have.
Done, okay. I should have a little button so I know when people are.
I could have kept going.
Some people are, that's true. I just have a few comments and 26 pages of speech. I mentioned about the difference in population from when we went and how much our budget has grown and all this, and I take into account all of the cost pricing differences and cost of living increases and all that. I take all that into account. You know, I noticed in the fire presentation it was highlighted loss of service and, you know, et cetera. This is what I mean, because you talk in the one hand of saying, well, we have to keep things available because we don't want any loss in service, but meanwhile we send 5 people to a heart attack. Recently there was an incident in Mr. Marker's neighborhood. Very impressed with the response time because I think you guys have a fabulous response time. I think you do great work. And after the ambulance was there for the first 3 minutes, a vehicle with 3 other firemen showed up. So now I have 5 firemen at this scene. We can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing or whether it's policy in Palm Beach County. There's only 14 counties in Palm Beach County, I mean in the state, which have county fire departments. A lot of them rely on, I mean, as it relates to EMS, not for fire, but as it relates to EMS services. So because in the private ambulance services, which I'm not advocating for here today, but in private ambulance services, which can get sued, unlike city ambulance services, you know, they think 2 is sufficient. The statute says 2. And why you send, because you've made a policy to send 3, which then requires 5, is where I'm having my difficulty. Because I think you guys do great work, and I really do. I think staff did a great work on all of the presentations. And I know I cut everybody off, but that doesn't mean I don't appreciate everything that all of you do, which I do. So, on the one hand, you say, you know, we're worried about being able to have a response time, but I got 5 people at another thing. That's the stuff that I say, look, there are cuts available here. There is ways to manage this payroll, and, you know, the fire department, and I know the argument's going to be, well, we weren't given enough in the last fiscal year, but the fire department had blown through 100% of its overtime budget within the first 6 months. I suggest to you that could also be a management issue, a timing issue, a management issue. So within all the departments, I do believe that when you have the kind of increase that we have, and I listened to all the arguments, and none of the cuts that we're talking about, and which, by the way, just because these are the things they said we cut, we have not seen all the budget in all its detail to know what else we can cut. I'm having to rely on the people that prepared the budget, which has general terms, to tell me what's the only things they can cut. That's not the way I work. You know, I'm a finance guy. I look at all the things. So I don't know what we're actually going to end up cutting. Maybe what they suggest on this board, and maybe something else. So, but I do know that most people want to pay less taxes, whether it's $100, because the vast majority of people are not using the services which you described will be cut. I don't think people are even going to notice some of these things, quite frankly. And, you know, I mentioned, I'm going to just say this, there's some of the, it's been really crippling for a lot of the businesses downtown. And we can argue, well, you know, we care about the homeowners. Well, that's great. But the people who actually made Delray Beach, who gave it the buzz and did all the stuff that everybody wants to come to, well, you're crippling them. And I said to somebody on the Historic Preservation Board the other day, I said, well, you know, everybody's worried about historic preservation. You're going to get it, but it's going to be a different kind of history. You're going to say, well, this used to be a restaurant. This used to be a clothing store. This used to be, because we are going to price them out of the market. We are going to price people out of the market. When I ran, everybody kept talking to me about, where is the money? I mean, they see all these increases. They want to know where all the money is. You know, we have a 40% increase in taxes, but they're not seeing 40% increase in services. I haven't, and I don't really think realistically most people in this room can say they have. So when you have there's one of the, and I've got letters from all of the big property owners downtown. All my fellow commissioners were copied, so I'm not going to go through the list. But you know, they have a uniform position: is that they have to pass everything on. They have to pass everything on to their consumer. And one of the property owners said to me, there's a store down there that they have not been able to raise, the rent calls for like a 3% increase every year. They've not been able to increase the rent on the people because the CAMs have gone up so high, because the real estate portion and their insurance portions have gone up so high. I can't help everybody, but if I can help them to the extent of Delray Beach's impact on their taxes, that's all I'm trying to do. I can't control what the insurance companies do. I can't control these things. I talked about the positions, the 30 positions that are still being budgeted for and have been budgeted for the last 2 years to the tune of about $1.8 million, and that's using a $30,000 average, $33,000 average salary. So when I say there's going to be other ways we're going to find money in this budget before we finally, put the black line to all this stuff and mark things out, I really do think we will. I think some of the things that you all are concerned about won't occur because I think there's more things here that we can see. We're having to rely. I mean, Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. But it's like the farmer going to the hen house, and the fox is standing in front of him, and he asks the fox, "Look, are we secure here?" "Oh yeah, we're fine. Don't worry." Because I can't see every aspect of the budget, which is really what I want to see. Which is, I know we talked about granularity, but I think that's important when you're asking people to approve a budget. What is in the budget? Having broad categories just doesn't work for me, and this has really been difficult. And just to cut things because you're saying, well, there's going to be services cut. Which services? Nobody's talking about getting rid of essential services. You talked about rent. Somebody else talked about rent for these home buyers. Well, I have to tell you that increase in taxes is being passed on to every single person that rents property, because those properties are not homesteaded. So giving them relief to help them so that the people renting the properties don't have to pay additional monies every year because the taxes have gone up. Yeah, I'm interested in that because they're already going to be paying their rent. I'm interested in them not having to pay an additional charge the next year because their taxes have gone up. If I can help in a small way, help the people that rent in this town, have businesses in this town. The one business said to me he couldn't, as I just mentioned, said he couldn't raise the rent because of all this. He had to let go somebody. So now they're operating with one fewer person in their store. Okay, but this is happening in other places. Everybody talks about, well, another restaurant out of business, and they talk about not being able to eat downtown. Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? It's because we're taxing people to death. And it's time, it's got to stop. This is a not sustainable way to continue, but just keep raising taxes every year without going in with a very sharp pencil and seeing really what we can cut. Which is why I wanted to go to the rollback rate. Because I know, piggybacking a bit on what you said, that next year when the implications of the fire contract come into play and we have to find an extra $22 million to staff those places, I'm not going to be able to do this for the people downtown. I'm not going to be able to do this for the residents. And even though the residents are only saving 3%, that's 3%. And that counts. Money counts in people's pockets. So we could keep talking about lack of services, but nobody really defines really which services. And I don't believe for a second that the fire department, if they were running on a reduced kind of things like that, would reduce their level of service. I just don't buy that because you guys are too proud, and I know darn well you'll comply. Someone makes a call, you will be there, just like you were with Mr. Marker's friend, whether or not these cuts are in place or not. And I believe that. And the same with the police department. You guys do great work. I'm not cutting you two out. I'm just giving them as an example because they're public service. So I'm not worried about public safety. I'm not worried about us losing that. I truly am not, because we're very good at what we do. But at some point, we have to give a break to the people that's paying everybody's salaries. I know we want to say that 70% of the homeowners are in the taxing base, and I don't know if that number still is currently true, Christina. But all I do know is the amount of taxes that are being paid by commercial aspects here, who are hiring everybody, who are the restaurants everybody want to go to. They need a break because I don't know about the rest of you, but I find going out to dinner on Atlantic Avenue really a very expensive experience. I mean, I go at lunch because it's cheaper, but I have to tell you, nobody's going to tell me that Atlantic Avenue is cheap because it is not. And with whatever we say here today, we're going to be increasing their taxes unless my whole goal was to freeze taxes this year. That was it, because I know next year I can't, for some of the reasons I've articulated here, and also because costs are going to go up. But I think I can get away with it this year. I think, as I said, there's more things in this budget we can find other than the ones that you've identified. And I'm not saying you haven't worked hard and staff hasn't worked hard. I just think, as I said, with these 30 positions, that's $1 million. That's a big number. And whether you go down, whether you go from 5 to 4, that's about $2 million without any loss of service. So I think there is money here, which is why I'm pushing for the rollback rate. As I said, I want to be able to see this, to be really be able to dig into it, to see what the cuts are ultimately going to be, because I don't know what they're going to be. I know we've got these things, which is the easy fix. I'm not going for the easy fix. We're going to have to dig into this budget and find it. It may include additional revenue sources, but I certainly think the citizens here deserve this year this break. And so I am supporting, which everyone knows, it's not a big surprise, the rate of 5.9063. And so that's where I am. And you would like to make a comment? Well, I was going to call for a vote, but go ahead.
I just have a couple more questions. I wanted to ask our police chief a couple quick questions. Could you describe the incident that occurred a few days before the 4th of July on A1A?
I'm sorry, what's
the shooting that occurred?
Oh, on the beach?
That was the same people that came from the rooftop of the parking garage, and then they were at the beach a few days. What's that?
That would have been me.
It was a few days before the 4th of July. Am I not correct? Like a week before that?
You're talking about the shooting on the beach.
Yes.
We did have a shooting on the beach. Unfortunately, there were a bunch of kids that came from a different city. Based on our investigation, it emanated out of Broward County, ended up in Palm Beach County, and then the third location was Delray Beach, the city, obviously, in Palm Beach County.
And some of those kids were the same ones from the earlier incident where the shooting happened in the parking garage here in town?
Yes, same with the garage. We were like their third stop, and similar to the garage scenario where they ended up on top of the garage. We were able to identify some of the names from the garage incident, similar names, the same people popped up in the beach incident. So they were familiar with Delray Beach. They knew to come here for some reason.
Got it. They thought they could come here and not get caught, is what it sounds like. And I recall, I've seen a lot of pictures from residents of the aftermath of that with bullet holes in balconies, in nearby cars. It was frankly a miracle no one was injured during that incident. As a result, you've provided additional patrols on the beach for the last few weeks, right?
Yeah, for the month. I thought it was incumbent upon me as a chief of police to provide the necessary security and safety. A lot of citizens were concerned about the incident, and rightfully so. So I immediately enacted a detail on the beach in the evening, and it's going for 30 days as of now, and then we'll look back and do a maintenance phase if necessary, or continue it.
And that's attempting to solve the problem of this group or similar groups thinking that Delray is somewhere where they can come on one of our main streets and discharge a firearm in public, correct? Because apparently they currently think that that's something they can get away with here, or they had up until now.
I want to send a message that you don't do that in Delray Beach.
Right.
In order for me to do that is to show of force. I want them to see us out there. And by putting them out there, it does cost us money to put them out there. I don't want to advocate that I don't want to save money. I think everything that the mayor is saying makes a whole lot of sense, and I think he's just trying to save people money, and you can't fault him for that. I mean that's a great mayor to want to save money, but I'm not sure if cutting police budget is the way to go. In my opinion, I feel like it's a little bit being penny wise, pound foolish. But I do think that us being out there is a show of force where the perception is that we're out there, and we're not going to do that in Delray because the Delray officers are out there. They'll go to another city. But the idea of us being out there, to me, is an obligation as a police department to the citizens to make sure they're safe.
And would you be able to do that if we go to this rollback rate? Would you be able to perform that function of having a show of force and increasing patrols after an incident like this?
Mr. Long?
The answer is, they have this. We're not talking about them getting any more money.
I'd like to hear the police chief's answer.
Well, that's okay. Well, if he did it this year, he can do it next year.
In an incident like this, would you be able, you just said how expensive it was to do these additional patrols. It doesn't sound like you'd have any room in your budget to do that again if we had another incident, or keep that up to have that show of force, to keep these gangs out of our neighborhoods. That's what it sounds like to me. Correct me if I'm wrong.
If you cut my budget, it does not allow for me to do what I want to do and what's necessary to keep the city safe at a level that we are expecting from our police department.
And additionally, you mentioned crime prevention resources that you would also have to cut that would likely have an impact. So in your opinion, overall, if we went with this cut, would it have a detrimental impact on public safety in Delray Beach?
It would have an impact on public safety, yes.
And I want to ask the fire chief a similar question. You referenced call time could be dramatically affected if we go from 2 or 3 to 2 people per truck. Could that, in your mind, does that lead to an impact in public safety?
Our responsibility is to get to the call as quickly as possible, and when staffing is reduced, that becomes more difficult. Units are not available. They may be available in another zone, but again, that's a delayed response in getting those assets to the call to be able to help the
Do any other municipalities, full-service municipalities in this county operate with 2 per truck?
The only 2 that currently operate with 2 are Riviera Beach and Palm Beach Gardens, and they are both moving in the direction of a 3-person rescue.
So we'd be the only one taking a step backwards that you know of?
We would be the only agency that I'm aware of that is going backwards on our staffing levels. Yes.
Got it. So I know, Mayor, you said you're not worried about public safety. You have faith in our departments, as do I. But when we have our department heads telling us definitively that public safety will be impacted with these budget cuts, I'm going to listen to them on this one. This is what they do, right? And I appreciate Commissioner Casal's creative idea with parking. We had a similar idea last year and got a crazy amount of pushback. I think we should pursue ideas like that, but we certainly can't depend on an idea that we haven't analyzed, haven't studied, haven't even talked about until now as a solution to this. We're talking about real problems right now, real problems in our neighborhoods that we need a budget to combat. And so we have to make a decision based on the information that we have. And that's based on the analysis that our staff has done. And again, I appreciate the perspectives of all my colleagues up here. I know everyone has the best interests of our residents and the property owners and our business and our economy in mind. I get that. And again, I think this 3/10 mills reduction, which is 6.0611, is still a victory on that front. But our department heads who do this full time are telling us this would impact public safety. And that's not to mention all the impacts on our special events or maintenance, etc. I have to believe in what they tell me. That doesn't mean we can't find creative solutions for the next go-around. But we can't depend on that now, because what if we don't?
We're not going to have another go-around. We're going to be paying the $22 million of the fire department next year with a contract that was done last year. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it this year. And I will say this, we're not talking about cutting police staffing. We're not talking about cutting fire staffing. We're talking about we haven't even counted the cameras that were going to be coming in and the other things. The technology is going to become to greatly assist the police department, which would have prevented, I believe, with what they're doing there, that the people coming in town with all these things. So just to say that the departments, that just because they want they think it's in their best interest and that it's going to quote public safety, I don't buy it. I don't buy that they're going to violate.
Mayor, they came in with numbers and data and presented it to us. No offense, what you're saying is anecdotal. What they're saying has numbers and data and research behind it. They did an analysis.
I can't get to any numbers and data because
we discussed this at 5 meetings.
And 4 meetings ago, Commissioner Casal asked for a detailed analysis to be along the lines that we used to have. We still don't have it. I only asked yesterday to give me the development worksheet, and they respectfully, that's not what they sent. They sent me essentially the sheets of the budget. I know what the budget says. I've gone through the budget. I've had other people look at the budget. So I'm very sorry. I do not believe that we're going to be losing any services. They may have to rearrange some of the personnel, and they may say just because the other counties have got roped into doing stuff doesn't mean that that is required to do. And if there is a staffing problem, then don't send out the ambulance, send out the 3-person truck.
So we know better than every other city in the county?
I don't know. I do my own research, so I don't just rely on what staff tells me. But as soon as I get through all my research, including these 30 positions that are worth $1 million.
Well, we've run out the clock on this, and so we're kind of in a position where we have to listen to
Right.
staff. In my
I'm
opinion,
I would
Can I ask a question?
before I pass the gavel.
Yeah,
Because I'm what? Yes.
I just want to ask about so you want to raise it to 5.9063 for
Lower
this
it to,
year.
yeah.
So what happens next year?
Well, next year when
You're
we have
gonna-
to,
you're
we're going to
gonna
have a
raise
very
it?
different. We will have a very different budget scenario next year, very different. And
So we're going to go.
there are going to be
a tenth
cost of
a
living. There's
percent,
going to
or
be
we're
new
gonna-
contracts with police. There's going to be a new contract with the city employees. There's going to be paying for the contractual obligations that we did with fire. There's going to also be other contractual obligations that we have that we're going to have to start paying for. So
we're looking
This-
at
this is it.
raising the millage.
I have no idea what it's
for-
going to look like. We're going to have to see what all the economic impact is. Hopefully, we have some properties coming online, which are going to give us some more revenues. But if we're going to do this, it can only be this year. It could only be this year. So I'm trying to give our people who have had 40% decades of just 4-5 years worth of double-digit increases in costs some break. And I just do not believe that we don't have the money in this budget when we finally delve through it and deal with the positions we're paying for, whether they're not here, or different things, that we will not find the money. I just don't believe it.
with respect to my colleagues, I find it hard to believe that we would lower millage this year by this amount and then vote to raise it again next year.
I know that
that
you don't,
seems unlikely to me.
I like to cut taxes. I ran on it, and everybody I
that's-
spoke to said, "Would you please cut taxes?"
But does anyone think property values are going to continue to go up through the end of the year and into next year? Because everything I've heard says they're going to cool.
Oh, I think you're correct.
So then we're going to lower taxes and then have less ad valorem coming in and then continue. I feel like we're going to be going into a tailspin if we do this now.
If I may, we will have some of these developments that have been approved, that are not yet, we're not yet seeing the tax benefit for in the coming future. So we shouldn't be talking about next year, really. No, I'm serious. If we can, look, I'm not talking about cutting services, I'm talking about increasing revenue by more than what is being decreased in that 4.9 million. And it's possible. It is possible. And the city has not been amazing, and that's because the prior commission, in getting the money that the residents deserve in fees in a number of areas. That's a fact. And I think that what you're seeing, and just to correct you, that contract with the fire was broken down into 3 years. 3 years because during the election time, people didn't want to see a big increase. So the last increase is pushed out, and the big increase is in the coming year, and it's going to be over. Well, it'll be at least 10, and then you'll have your typical rate increase. So you're looking at, we're going to go up, if my calculations are correct. This year, I think we're looking at about 48.9 million in cost. And next year, with that increase plus the regular rate, we're looking at 61.4 million in cost.
Well,
We're
that's my
never,
point.
this is
We
the
won't
only.
be able to do this
He
next year.
is correct. If we want to give the residents a break, this could be the only time. And I'm not suggesting, and please don't say that I am, any loss of service. I am suggesting that our city manager can figure out ways to creatively increase revenues. And I realize you got pushback on that parking because, one, the parking increases you suggested impacted the downtown businesses. Two, they impacted the residents. This is not what I am asking for. I am saying let us monetize our assets and give the residents a little bit of a break.
I'm passing the gavel. I would like to make a motion that we approve a millage rate of 5.9063.
I'll second.
Okay? You've got the chair. I know you always wanted it, so.
I might not give it back. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Long?
No.
Ms. Cassell?
Yes.
Ms. Burns?
No.
Mr. Carney?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mayor Carney. Yes.
I'm a Mr. too.
And Mr. Markert?
Yes.
Great. May I have the gavel back?
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I may, before you adjourn the meeting, given the direction on the rollback rate of 5.9063, I'd like to propose that we host a follow-up workshop meeting. There's a lot of commentary regarding, if I may please.
I apologize.
Thank you, ma'am. Granularity, detail, and again, learning your expectations in that regard. Now that this millage rate has been adopted, we will go about the process of working with the Palm Beach County Office of the Property Appraiser, Tax Collector, et cetera, to get squared away in that regard. So we do have much work to do. So the direction is to likewise not compromise level of service, and we will do what we can to identify other opportunities. I wish to therefore propose an additional workshop session to take place well in advance of the adoption of the budget process, which will be the 2 meetings in the month of September. We currently have a meeting scheduled for Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, 6 o'clock workshop meeting. There are 2 items, one of which related to Atlantic and then one other matter. I would like to therefore ask us to convene at 4 o'clock that same afternoon so that we can consider
What date?
That's Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. I'm proposing that we convene at 4 o'clock for this specific purpose.
And then we have the other meeting afterwards.
Yes,
Oh,
sir,
no,
we
we have
have
the other workshop portion afterwards.
the workshop portion
For the
already
historic
scheduled
and
for
the other
6
stuff,
o'clock.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I would like to accomplish that because my interest is to do what we can to identify revenue opportunities. The feedback I'm hearing from everybody, all 5 of you, and I have to be clear in this regard, ladies and gentlemen, is to not impact level of service. We do what we can to create revenue scenario opportunities as well as other considerations for expenditure adjustments. And again, please forgive me. Again, forgive me if I've disappointed anybody relative to granularity. I'm learning you all's expectations in that regard, so we're getting to that place as well. So I will work with the Department of Finance to provide that in advance of August 13th so that we can have a productive dialogue between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock so that we can prepare a clean budget adoption process based on the policy of 5.9063. But again, I appreciate whatever support you ladies and gentlemen can muster with respect to ancillary revenue outcomes that will not adversely impact the residents of Delray Beach. You just came up with a consideration. We will offer analysis as to what that might look like. So I will begin my work in advance of August 13th so that we can have an intelligent, productive conversation and have a clean budget adoption process to the best of our ability during the month of September.
I'll send you a letter with some of the aspects that I would like to see.
Well, you and I can also talk orally as we often do, sir.
We do. I know that.
And that's the case with all 5 of you. So can I please have your support in terms of that meeting? I think that would be extremely helpful given the direction you've offered at this time.
Makes absolute sense because we need to understand
consensus
exactly
for 4 o'clock to this effect.
We need
August
to know.
13th.
We need to know what wasn't spent this year in the budget in the various departments. So what's getting rolled over?
Mr.
A
Mayor,
lot of that stuff.
I will do my work.
Okay.
Always do. Always have.
Are there any other
consensus for 4 o'clock? August 13th,
4 o'clock is fine.
2024. Everybody's okay?
Mr. Long is okay with you? Yep. Mr. Markert? Mr. Cassell? Yes.
It's 2 hours before we're convening anyway. It's very
Perfect.
convenient, and that gives us time to prepare.